All right, welcome to the Yeoman podcast. I am your host, Geoff Graham. I'm delighted to have with me today two of my dear friends, two Yeoman entrepreneurs, Craig Johnson of Matchstic and CBQ, Charles Brian Quinn of Greenzie. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We were having a conversation a few days ago just about the state of the world. The vibes, as Charles had said, like what's going on out there. And it was a fun one. We thought like, hey, why don't we press record and see where this goes? So that's where we're going to go with this episode. We have a few things we're going to talk about. But the first thing we're going to start with is sort of kind of how people in each of our industries are feeling about the world. Before we do that, I'm going to ask Craig and CBQ to introduce themselves. Craig, I'll start with you.
Sure. Craig Johnson. I'm a co-founder and partner at Matchstic, which is a branding firm that we started a little over 21 years ago. And anytime you see corporations kind of overhaul their name and or image, that's what we do.
Awesome. So I am Charles Brian Quinn. I go by my initials CBQ. In the industry, friendly, friends, family, all call me that. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of Greenzie. We automate commercial lawn equipment, make it self-driving to help landscapers do their best work, make beautiful landscapes and do it with reduced labor costs, more efficiency, productivity, safety. And there's actually one right in front of me because I'm sitting in my truck. And there's a mower without a person on it driving around. So I could turn it around.
You're all set up with your phone.
Oh, yeah, I could. Let's see. Oh, it just went behind this car. But there's an engineer out there. He's testing. It's behind the car.
Yeah, sure it is.
Oh, there we go. There it is. You can see it. That is a green mower. I don't know if you can see that. But it is doing a turn and trying to go straight. And so that thing is just mowing out there. So this is a fun company. We're venture backed. We're based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I got engineers working. I'm at the office today, and this is the quietest place to do it. So thanks for having me, Geoff. Good to see you, Craig.
Yeah, glad you're here. So y'all, CBQ is what do you call it? A lawnfluencer? So you should check out the Greenzie. Greenzie publishes all kinds of cool things about what they're doing in the industry. And also check out. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we have YouTube channel. We have an Instagram. Our Instagram is probably the best if you want to see a mower driving around by itself or some fun clips of us and our engineers. It's Get Greenzie on Instagram and Most Greenzie on the rest of the channels. Thank you for the plug, Geoff.
And do also check out Matchstic. Matchstic has been around, what are y'all, 22 years or so?
21 years, yeah.
21 years.
Just don't put the K on the end of Matchstic.
Yeah, Matchstic without a K. Matchstic that ends with C. Has been doing great work. And if you check out what they've done, you'll recognize a lot of the brands they worked on from smaller businesses to really big significant companies that you've seen.
And I would say kind rezoning of city of Atlanta. I see those signs still. All
those signs. That was actually all got some kind of national press for how cool all those little all the city of Atlanta signage was. And the main thing, the two big things that I'm working on right now, I have a couple projects in the hopper, generally tech type things, but working on a lot of ion related stuff for our development, and that I'm a partner with my brother Vince in the development of Ion, a big neighborhood in the Low Country. I'm developing a little mountain lodge in North Carolina, kind of a passion project called Big Ridge Mountain Club. Y'all check it out. And also have kind of a tech-enabled services business, which is really in the print world, called Periodical.ink. And we're it's a bit anachronistic, but we're taking all your favorite digital content that you like to read, but hate to read on your phone or on your computer, and producing personalized print publications for people and mailing them to you. That's a really fun business. We're in our really early stages.
So cool.
And it's been fun to build. But so each of us are sort of in different.
Before we get started, though, guys, we're entrepreneurs. I have the greatest idea for a new company. Can I tell it to you guys?
Please. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is $1 million idea, and I'm launching it right now. So just this is how it works, right? It's all idea, no execution. So what is the ultimate status symbol if you are wealthy? Is it a car? Is it, help? I would venture to say it is owning chickens. Owning chickens is the ultimate status symbol.
Yeah, you mentioned this the other day.
So my company is Rent the Chicken. It is a chicken rental service. You pay us, I think, $2,000 a month. We come, we bring the chicken, we bring the coop, we do all the work for you, and you get the eggs, and you get to say you own chickens.
Get like what, a dozen and a half eggs out of that? That sounds great.
However many, it depends on the plan. You might be on the pro plan there, Craig. I haven't figured out the
But again, I'm not doing this for chickens. I'm doing this for status. This is what I have to remember.
The eggs are extra. I mean, this is like nice to have, but it's the status really. And
I think someone's already doing this business in Brooklyn. I'm pretty sure I've seen something.
I bet so.
About
I bet so. I think it would do well. But anyway, I'm launching it.
I know people do this with bees. I know people do it with bees too, like beehives.
Yeah.
So that would be.
I better go get the domain before this podcast airs. So nobody.
Yeah. Well, you'll have at the rate that we get our production done, you'll have about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm sorry, Geoff. You were trying to get into the podcast.
Well, so in our various worlds, how are you feeling? What are the vibes out there? What are the people you work with, your clients? How are they feeling about things? New election, geopolitical stuff going on, eggs, what's happening?
Such interesting vibes out right now. Like, I know that we live in a polarized world, but I literally have friends that are so excited about everything that's going on and texting me things all the time about this is great, this is great, this is great. And I have friends that believe the world is falling apart and are texting me things like, this is horrible, this is horrible, this is horrible. And it's such a weird time to kind of like live in the midst of that. I do think my industry, I'm very curious to see what happens. I do think that there definitely can be some negative effects to my industry, but I'll qualify it on the back end. But I do think that, it looks like there's potential for the government to spend a lot less money on things than it has been. And I think that I think there's probably not an insignificant amount of that filters its way down directly or indirectly to a, marketing agency, creative agency, branding firm. Yeah. And I know a number of firms that market themselves as working with nonprofits and NGOs. And I think that, they're probably going to need to really to pivot. We do a fair amount of work with, nonprofits and group. I've had a number of conversations with people, recently who said, hey, let's pause everything because a good amount of our funding comes from, the government, and we don't know how this is going to shake out. And so we just need to push pause on this. Now, what I will also say, I had an employee recently say, talk to me about what you're thinking, because the world's obviously falling apart. So what are we doing about this? And I said, it's a small amount, percentage wise, maybe 10% or less of our work would be affected by this. But also we've had seasons where there was a season where probably 20-25% of our work came through, real estate, specifically multifamily developers. And a couple of years ago, interest rates went up. Every one of our multifamily clients completely halted every project, called us, stopped work. And so I've said, listen, these things happen. We've been through them before with different industries. I've always said because we're industry agnostic, the amount that, you could look at the industries we're doing a lot of work in, and you can see, probably what industries are doing well and which ones are not. And over time, you can see that stuff come and go. So that's a lot of what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Geoff, you want to go, or you want me to weigh in?
Please. You.
So I sell to landscapers, and our other customer are the OEM manufacturers of big lawn equipment. Excuse me. And the dealers and distributors who support them and distribute the product. And It's been interesting. I've been in this business now for 6 years, so I am not new to it, and it is a seasonal business. And I mean that when you mow lawns in the U.S., there is a season, right? No question about it. Everything, the grass only grows a certain amount of time, and it needs to be cut and maintained, and that's when the contracts are for the part of the work that we do. So I've been through, it's interesting, even when COVID was happening, it was very interesting because we used to sort of joke, like, hey, the grass didn't get the memo. Like, it didn't, here the economic terms were like, hey, it's kind of bad right now. Let's grow a little less. It's really dependent on weather. And it's also like some of these contracts are multi-year. And, if you're mowing a hospital, like they don't sort of decide, we'll not mow around the right-of-ways and near the helipad. Like, oh, well, So, and it does have to be maintained. There are ways you can decrease your amount of mowing, but so I will say, with that said, our business also tends to lean, our customers tend to lean MAGA, tend to lean right, tend to be more conservative. So they are all hell yeah, all in, very fired up about the new leadership. A lot of them that we work with are business owners and are always constantly trying to watch their spend. So, and it's typically a business, I can say this without chagrin, like don't like paying taxes. So when they do, they want to know where it goes. And so things like the Doge that are happening right now are getting our industry fired up. Now, having said that, to take like a little bit of a steel man, like I don't think historically it really works out well when inflation is high, government spending starts to go down. I don't think people realize how much of GDP is government spending. Like as you mentioned, Craig, like a good portion of, a lot of these guys' contracts are state, municipal, and when those sort of start to go down, everybody's going to be like, ooh, this kind of hurts. Like, austerity, right, comes at a cost. And if we have to implement some of that, a bit of austerity, it can hurt all of our businesses. So while I would say the general vibes about political, economic, are very good in my industry, I think some of us are kind of tempered in looking at, historically, like, what does this debt boom spiral sort of look like? I think we're definitely in unprecedented terms with the spiral, with the debt that we have, and we've got to do something. But I'm not sure everybody realizes. Everybody's excited to cut all the spending until you're like, uh-oh, we cut a little too much. How do we get that back? And it's a little tricky. Geoff, what do you think? What are you feeling?
Okay, and probably a bit like, and Craig, how many employees do y'all have? Like
about 30.
30, yeah. And so I'm at a point in my career where I have no employees, but a lot of subcontractors, and the people I deal with are pretty diverse, from the technology side of what I'm working on to rural North Carolina construction to reasonably progressive Charleston, South Carolina. I'll start with the construction folks in North Carolina. I had we're building another building up in the mountains right now. I'm the owner contractor, and had a framing crew lined up to be coming, and lined up in December to be coming in late January. And the guy just kind of offhandedly mentioned, he's Hispanic, and he kind of offhandedly mentioned, like, oh, we'll see how it goes. All of our guys are good, but I'm worried that we won't, that there's going to be a lot of labor gone
Yes.
by the time the project rolls around. It's like, oh, wow. I guess intellectually I appreciated that, but I hadn't really, really registered. And sure enough, when it came time for them to show up, checked in with him, phone disconnected, he's gone. Nobody knows where he is. And he had been, he'd been in that area for, I gather, about a decade. There's that side of things, like that sort of uncertainty. And I need to talk to more people to see how that is unfolding for people who are directly impacted by immigration related stuff. But then on the other side, like CBQ, like you said, the kind of rural North Carolina people, they're pretty excited. They're very, very excited. And then Craig, as you shared, like a lot of the professionals I work with elsewhere, oh my goodness, it's like terrified. People are very upset, extremely concerned, terrified about rights, terrified about the nature of our democracy. Had dinner with some folks, two good friends. One is an administrator in higher ed, who expressed an enormous amount of concern, like grave concern.
I've heard
things.
that it's an ongoing threat to our democracy, or is it threat to our bureaucracy? I can't tell which one it is. You might be.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard is the dichotomy is either you think the things that are happening are a threat to a democracy or a threat to the bureaucracy. It depends on your worldview, right?
Yeah, like that. I hear what you mean. That's how like people are either framing it as one or the other. And I'm, radical. I guess if I had to have a label, some sort of radical anarchist,
Sure.
but at the same time, try to live in the real world and just sort of bend things in the direction of freedom and autonomy and community and localism. And those are sort of my general bent. But I don't know where I'm really going with that, but I do try.
Let me ask you guys this: Did you guys see the what Bezos did at the Washington Post? Did you hear about his basically his he said, and I think he made an announcement. We were chatting about it the other day that the opinion section will now be based on liberty and freedom, and I don't want to quote it because I'm going to misconstrue it. But I've heard two sides of that too. It might be fun to steelman both of those. Would be one is that feels like a turn, in the right direction. If one were, like Geoff said, into freedom and liberty. However, I think you could steelman it and say, how strange is it that now an opinion section should be mandated by someone to only talk about these things? Wouldn't a true freedom of press be allowed to be like, you could say anything you want? That would be true freedom, right? What's your take on that, Geoff? I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't know. I mean, it's Bezos' house. Like, he owns the place.
Right, he owns
like,
it. Yeah.
Hiring the people, and like, your job is to work for me. I guess I had
that's an interesting thought, though, right?
I had a different take on I had a different reaction to that statement.
That?
I am, I think I have found among, particularly in the tech world, and especially among very people who have a long career with very large business, that they tend to be, I find them to be tone deaf to the degree of corporatism and cronyism that exists within our economy. And like, we need more freedom. People need to be able to buy their thing, from the other side of the world and have it delivered to their doorstep immediately. And that's what freedom is like. We need more of that. We need to support anything that can enable that. And I'm like, well, the things that enable that are an enormous amount of public funding and infrastructure that, the guy on Main Street right there, he's paying his income taxes, and the general fund is contributing to, like, all the stuff that's enabling that good that's sold distantly to come there. That's a bit of a ramble, but my sense is Bezos and a lot of people in that sort of camp are completely tone deaf to how much our policies and for how long our policies have tilted the playing field in their favor, in the favor of large scale, kind of globalist type, or, global corporations, how much they've tilted the playing field, I think, very unfairly. And they're paying, they're not paying a thing. So when I feel like when Bezos gets on there, it's sort of like, now that the governments have built all the infrastructure that's required for a business like Amazon to do really, really well, and he didn't have to pay for that. He didn't have to pay for that. He's like, yeah, let's do more freedom now. And I'm like, well, I do want more freedom, but I also want people to pay as they go. And I don't get the sense they do. That's a long-winded answer. That was my reaction to that.
It's funny. Maybe it's the branding guy in me, but I saw a lot of it as almost more of a positioning statement and saying like, you know what, all these newspapers are the same. And I think I did hear somewhere him saying like, you can get these opinions, like they're all out there on the internet. You can find them. So we want to be known for, what are we going to be known for? I mean, this is like the work that we do all the time. Like, you know, believing that customers in the market can really only remember one thing about you. So what is that one thing going to be? And how do you define it? And how do you lean into it? And how do you do something perhaps that's different than what other people are doing?
That's
so
a good point.
I could be wrong, but I just looked at it as a differentiation play and trying to do something that can increase, you know, subscribers.
Is it really like I just wouldn't think that Bezos bought that business because he wanted to just make lots of money with it. Like,
well, if you look at the demographics, the readership is DC area, and then surrounding area, right? I mean, and then of course you got your long tail online, but subscribers are all DC. So, you know, I don't know if you deal in power and influence, it seems like that would be a pretty good one to have a pulse on or own. And I think this is where I think I differ from, you know, some people who, you know, there's two thoughts that come to mind, two that I think would be interesting to explore with you guys. Is one would be, I think in the Constitution, it does mention freedom of the press. So the press is mentioned, right? And so there is this notion that, like, it's very easy for us to say, hey, you know what? These guys should do whatever they want. It's a private enterprise. But it is sort of publicly mentioned that we have this, like, you can't jail a journalist for saying things. That's all kinds of other stuff. So there's some freedom granted to them. And you might even say that, like, their distribution, although it's changed, it is not, you know, I think it's all over the internet now. But anyway, I think there's something to that. Then the other fun side of that would be, well, let me stop there. I'm curious about, like, you know, in this new realm of, like, where these things are, it could just be a branding thing, or it could be like, is this how all newspapers need to be? Should they all take action from this? Or are they just privately owned companies that can do, or is there some quasi, you know, public-private, you know, benefit that they do by telling us the news? Or I mean, we're basically talking about the opinion page too, though, which is very different, right?
I think I got to say, even though I'm 51 now, I haven't really paid a lot of attention to newspapers. I mean, I certainly have read articles in them, but, like, I imagine, like, a veteran of the industry would probably have a pretty good perspective about, you know, there have been eras of opinion at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times where they've had particular bent on thing or predictably have taken a certain thing, and that has been their brand, kind of as Craig was alluding. I wonder, when you were saying that about, like, this intentional positioning, that made me think, and kind of coupled with CBQ's statement about, like, this is a newspaper that's seeking to influence people or its readers
in the Beltway, for sure. Yeah.
I wonder if that pivot was essentially like Bezos reading the tea leaves and trying to curry favor with an administration that is,
totally,
you know, is at least presenting itself as valuing those things much more than the preceding one. And also that made me wonder, like, oh, are they just, like, utilitarian? They're just, like, saying whatever they need to say to get as much power or be as successful as they can. And that kind of rubs me. You know, too.
Zuckerberg did the same thing. He did it a little earlier, right?
Yeah, he did. He, I mean, I think he
came out and read the tea leaves and said, freedom, and we shouldn't have done this, and here's what we're doing moving forward. I mean, that was a very good tea leaf read, right? He's pretty quick.
I gotta say, I'm still giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I think he might actually be genuine. Like, I think he might.
I don't doubt it. Yeah, I don't doubt it. I think. By the way, I think
the thing is, like, anyone who starts working out, it is a thing where they sort of have a change of world. I mean, it's, you know, it's a bit of
you get punched in the face. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Once you've done that, you kind of become like, oh, wait a second, the world is a little different than I thought it was. And I also feel like he felt supremely betrayed by, I'd say misled by the whole FBI, CIA stuff, getting into their business.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about journalism now is that, in a way, like, society is, or journalists, like, and I think just like you're doing Periodical, we all kind of pick and choose what is our personalized newspaper, which might be, your social media feed or just your friends, your group chats, your whatever. But I don't think that it's a lack of information out there, though. I do see value in having somebody who's paid to dig into things. But it's interesting to see some journalists who've kind of gone, quote unquote, like freelance, an independent journalist that gets their own personal subscribers to their things.
I mean, those guys are, and of course they're the air is thin up where they are, but they're independent journalists now who've left, whatever big name newspaper, and are doing their own thing on Substack.
You mean like Barry Weiss with the Free Press?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, she's kind of created an entire new publication. I'm thinking about just independent people like Matt Taibbi.
That's another good example.
I mean, he was a totally mainstream journalist, in the press pool and all those sorts of things for a long time, and an investigative journalist. And now he's continuing to do subscriber supported investigative journalism, which is kind of wild. Like, the thinking was you had to have the big infrastructure of the New York Times or whoever to fund investigative journalism. I'm speaking out of turn here. As I said, I don't really know the newspaper industry.
Well, this would be a fun steelman argument for you guys. I would want, why don't we each take a side or take both of them, and let's talk about where you should get your news. I feel like there's two extremes, and I know you guys are on X, Twitter, whatever it's called, because we send each other links. And so hopefully it doesn't out all of you on where you stand on things, but should we be getting our news from the fire hose of real-time reporting, or should we be getting our news from The Week, or whatever exists? I don't actually know if it exists. I mean, harken back to Walter Cronkite on the morning news would tell you exactly what you needed to know and just report the news. That should there be some filter on it, or lens or opinion piece, or should we go to the fire hose? Craig, what do you think?
Well, one,
are you asking him the steel man, try and make the best argument?
Try and do one or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
One, I don't like shoulds in life.
Sure.
Also, I think it comes down to who do you trust? Like, do I trust?
Sure.
There may be big organizations I do trust, and people, because of the people that are leading them, and I may have big ones that I don't trust. There's going to be small time journalists I trust and others that I don't. So I think it's interesting because it's kind of I don't know, for me personally, it's a mix of all of the above. It's anything from, my college friend he's got an interesting take and teaches me things, to another coworker who has a completely opposing point of view than I do, but we have open conversations about it, to, I think it's important to get a lot of it, and then through it. So, it's important. What my favorite thing is to be able to find somebody that completely disagrees with me, that we can have, great, healthy debate, because I do believe that it helps me think, the ability to say things out loud. And it's like, sometimes you say something, you're like, well, now that I hear myself say that sounds kind of crazy, or somebody gives you a retort back and you're like, maybe you're actually right on that,
point. Yeah.
And I was doing, and I love just the concept is the ability to speak is equal to the ability to think and to form our own opinions. But it is very difficult today to find somebody who very much is, of a different mindset than me, that we can openly debate. Because, there are times where it gets my heart rate up a little bit, and I'm like, whoa, can I stay engaged in this? Can I keep doing it? But like, it's so easy to get stuck in, okay, there's these 5 guys that I text and we all agree about everything, and it's just a big echo chamber. And that can be fun. But what I think is really fun is like somebody like, well, here's another way to think about it. And I'm like, well, okay, do I still think the same thing? Is that, or maybe that just twisted my thinking a little bit, and I've got to work this out. So I didn't totally answer your question, but it's something that like, I want more people in my life that we can like love each other and openly very much disagree and debate.
That's fair.
I
have a thought, but go ahead, Geoff.
Well, I was thinking about how much of a struggle it like. To your point, Craig, I think it is really easy to, if you just rely on your sources, to get comfortable with a particular way of thinking, or you're never challenged, and you have to be challenged to have better opinions. So I think that's a great point. To the point that I don't know if I can. I'm not going to try to steel man only getting my information from credentialed, reliable sources. It would come off as too disingenuous. Maybe I should. Maybe that's a reason why I should try to do that. But my general view now is like, I actually don't subscribe to any big sources at all. And instead what I do, this is how I use X, is I just follow people I know and trust, and they retweet stuff. And so like I'm kind of free riding on them filtering. Like I'm letting them filter.
Sounds like what Craig is sort of saying. Well, I wonder if there's a mental model though, if you're, and I hate to say this, if you're young and naive and you don't know who to trust, then it also becomes a challenge, especially in this world of AI when like, I don't think any of us trust AI, but I think some people do. And so is there a point when you ask like an AI agent, like what's going on and what answer do you get? Is it trustable, or is it a culmination of like all the opinions out there, or is it just the ones that were most popular, or was it biased? It's a fascinating topic to me. If could a Walter Cronkite of today exist? Like, could we have an omnipresent who?
I wasn't channeling. I was asking, like, I'm trying to imagine who that is. Yeah. Go ahead. If I interrupt you, finish your thought, though.
No, I mean, you're right, because I feel like the media is so fractured. You could not say, like, well, we have Joe Rogan on one side and then you have so-and-so on the other side. There is not, I don't think there exists.
Is a guy like, I kind of view a guy like Lex Friedman as sort of, as sort of broadly trusted. Do I have an accurate take on that? Like,
I would say broader than most anybody.
And poor Lex is undergoing a lot for criticism for his interview with Zelensky, and I don't know if we want to move into that next if we're off this topic, but I think he's coming on a lot of fire for giving him a stage and audience. He's come out. Really? He recently even said something and then even apologized for it. So I think it's tough to be an independent journalist, because the moment you have an opinion on something and not report the news, which it's hard not to, as Craig mentioned, as a human, it's tough not to, when you talk about it. Even Lex in engaging with people might be giving them, as like people would argue, like we should cancel him for even giving them a forum, right? He wanted to interview. Did he interview Kanye?
He did, yeah. It's the only time I've ever heard him get upset with one of his guests. But he got
and so in some point, like, if Kanye ends up becoming a brilliant, marketing strategist, and we're all like, wow, back in the 2020s, his initial work in sort of rage bait, was incredible. Like he was the most rage baity, clickbaity genius of all of them. And we're like, that was a form of art that was just coming about because AI and all this stuff. And we look back on history and go, man, he was brilliant. Right now, we might look back and a lot of us might agree that he's sort of might be undergoing some mental challenges. But one could steal, man, that he's a performer. It's the ultimate performance.
Well, I talked to a friend who is probably wrestling with the fact that he's a longtime Kanye fan. And he said, I think Kanye's thing is he wants to prove that he can do or say whatever he wants and get away with it. And so he's just constantly trying to up the ante on it. Yeah. And that's his game.
Huh. Right. I would agree with that. It's like, people used to tell me, they're like, I hate Tom Cruise. And I would be like, and I would be like, why? And they're like, this Scientology nonsense that he's in. And I'm like, well, I don't understand that, because I think if I were an actor and my craft was acting and I love to pretend and to like believe things, like Scientology would be the ultimate form of craft. It would be like me saying I love building software and I go home and I build software, right? Like you wouldn't fault me for that. You'd be like, that's your craft, dude. So I don't know. I kind of buy that. I think he might be looked back on as a genius in when the world is more full of like clickbaity, like how do I get attention? And attention is the main like thing we trade because money is gone. Maybe we'll be like, hey, he was a genius back then at getting attention. Now, whether he converts it into a Shopify store that sells a shirt that has a Nazi symbol on it or a diamond Nazi or whatever he's doing now, maybe he changes, but those seem to be the currency, right? Being a Nazi is coming back into like the worst thing you could be, especially. Anyway, I think it's fascinating. I'm not going to steal mankind yet, but I see the argument.
I think I'm thinking about other people. I think that the guy's clearly a genius artist to have done what he does. And I think he clearly has, I think he clearly has really bad problems, really difficult problems. I'm reminded of like, there was a time when Bobby Fischer was a celebrity, the chess player, and an unbelievably amazing chess player. And a guy who had similar problems, but we didn't live in a media age at that time. And he just kind of faded into obscurity. I can't remember what his ultimate fate was, but
might be a similar thing happening.
That's what's going on here. And,
so I
don't think it's right to view what's going on with him as
all performative.
I'll just stick up for people with mental illness that I think think what's going on with him is some racist type. I think he has got, he's black, but I think he's got problems. And I also think there's an element of what you just described in terms of the ego that builds up around someone who's made such a amazing living by being a artist, producer,
performer.
Yeah.
Well, so if you guys want to change topics, Craig, you got something, or can I propose a topic?
Yeah, well, I'll just say the last thing when we're talking about news. I heard this concept of the Yeoman amnesia effect or whatever, which is
right.
Okay, yeah.
What is that?
That when it's when you're reading the newspaper and somebody writes an article about something that you know a lot about, and you read it and you're like, this person clearly has no idea what they're talking about, right. And I know all about why it's wrong. And then you go on and read the rest of the newspaper and forget that fact, and you read the rest of it like it's total fact. Like I was talking about this with my brother. Yeah, and you feel informed. I was talking with my brother, and there is a one of these journalists who's kind of gone independent. And he listens to like every podcast he's on or whatever. And he said the one time my brother works for this large insurance company. And he said the one time that he talked about my company, we heard what he said and said he has no idea what he's talking about. He's totally wrong. He doesn't get it. But then we go right back to believing it all. And so now whenever I take in news, I'm like, should I trust any of this? Does anybody really know what they're talking about?
I just had an experience with that made me, it was so frustrating to me. This I'd follow, and I don't mean this as a disparagement, but like I'd follow this, what's his name? Mike Solana, Pirate Wires guy, and generally find him to be real compelling and interesting and have good takes on stuff. And he went off on a little side rant about a topic I know a lot about, which is zoning, land use, all these sorts of things. I'm like, oh man, this is such an embarrassingly wrong take about this thing that I happen to know a lot about. And then I was like, well, wait a second. I've been paying attention to this guy for years probably and thinking he's had all these brilliant takes. Has he been every bit as wrong about all these other things? So kind of
not a gel man.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting topic for you guys. I think we're all the same age, but I want you to think that the argument that I would propose is Russia.
Okay.
And if you are a young person, you were born post 9/11, what's the big deal with Russia? Why are they bad? Like, they just seem like another country. They've got.
Have you not seen any James Bond movies?
Yeah, I haven't seen those either. Not the old ones. I only see the new ones,
I'm just
right?
kidding.
So again, you're right. Like, I'm new. I'm new to this. Like, why do all these boomers and aging millennials and Gen Xers, of which we might be some of those, why do they care so much about Russia? Like, do you see what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm getting this right, but
the really young
I've
people
heard,
I know, they do not. It's not even on the radar screen. But I mean, I have a small sample size of my kids and their friends. It's like it's not something they really think about a lot.
yeah, but so they must have a chapter or maybe a sentence or two in the world politics book or U.S.
Yeah.
world history around the Cold War. But are we still in it? Like, it ended when Reagan said, put down that wall. But are we still in a Cold War? Are we in a hot war? What's going on? What's y'all's take on that? Go Russia.
I often
Zelensky,
wonder
Ukraine.
I often think that as long as nuclear weapons exist, it seems like we're in a perpetual Cold War all the time.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like my answer about all of that is long and not all, maybe controversial, but not quite fringe. I think that following the collapse of the Soviet Union, we had the West had a missed opportunity to welcome Russia in particular into the West, and advised it probably from a good place, counseled it in its sort of economic transition in a way that, for whatever reason, it was a bit botched, and a lot of the nation's assets were sort of captured by the criminal class that had been in the Soviet Union, and it was very painful. I think the life expectancy of Russian men dropped by like 10 years or some huge number after the Soviet Union collapsed. It's huge. So you imagine, like, that's apocalyptic. Like, that's a really big deal. And so, was that avoidable? Knowing the history, it's hard to know. I think it probably was. I think that the West could have helped with that transition in a much better way. But whatever it is, we're here where we are, and I think we got to view that. It's useful to view that nation as one that's trying to emerge from a disastrous experience where a lot of people there do hold the West and the United States in particular responsible for part of their plight.
Interesting.
And I also think, like, you got a whole bunch of people, like, God, all these ancient people in politics now who cut their teeth in the Cold War, and or no matter what, like, everything is viewed like the Soviets are the enemy, and it's just this existential conflict. It's not possible for them to imagine that there's nothing but, like, great, terrible stuff gonna come out of there. And so we've had a lot of, I mean, I'm of the camp. I'm a Scott Horton fan. He has this new book, Provoked. I haven't read it, but I've listened to him a lot about it, about the Ukraine situation. I kind of think, like, we got a lot of people who have manifested this conflict by wanting to vilify that country. And we've done our State Department, our intelligence agencies have been, their noses are not clean. I should say that.
Yeah, I think that I've been on this journey probably the last 5 years. I think that probably a lot of things in my worldview evolved through the COVID experience, in terms of, like, voices that I trusted and what is real, what is not, and COVID caused me to question a lot of things, but I think I just always grew up, I'm a child of the 80s, like, America, sure, we are the good guys. Russia is the bad guys. I mean, Rocky IV, when like, yeah. And all of a sudden at the end, all the Russians love Rocky and they want to be Americans. And I'm like, this is what the world should be. And
Yakov Smirnoff, remember that?
Yeah. I mean, the last 5 years, I'm like, wait, maybe we're not always the good guys. You know? And let me think about it from this other point of view. Okay, yeah, imagine if you live in an area like this and the U.S. has constantly been coming in and bombing places or whatever, you know, like,
or giving you aid.
Maybe it would,
just some U.S. aid. We're just giving it to you.
Yeah. Like maybe, you know, what would I think if I was in their shoes? You know, I've just asked myself a lot of those questions, and I don't have a lot of facts and things, but I can tell you I'm definitely a lot more open to the fact that, like, maybe we're not always good, and maybe our enemies are not always bad. So,
and I think it could also be true that, you know, yes, there are really bad actors in Russia, and yes, there are really bad actors in Ukraine, and they're bad. Like there's bad actors all around everywhere. I think we can probably assume that, you know, we're doing, you know, our intelligence agencies are doing some pretty questionable stuff, and they're motivated by questionable means. Like, and yes, that is happening in other places as well. So,
but it's interesting. There was this Tucker Carlson did a tour of Russia. And I think he got criticized immensely for saying how, you know, I'm here, the grocery stores are clean, you know, and I remember a lot of the pushback being like, how fucking dare you, you know, pardon my French, but like, what, you know, how can you say this? They're, you know, an enemy. And, you know, I think both of those things could be true, that like they could have undergone quite a bit since the 80s. How long ago was that? I don't want to do the math because I'm
40
50. 44 years, something like that. So it's, you know, it's been a while. So have things changed there? Maybe have they adopted some of the things that me being an American tend to espouse an ideal? I mean, yeah, maybe they have a rocky past. Like, you know, they could point at us and our past and say, gosh, you guys had slavery for way too long there, US. Like, you know, you still deal with ramifications from that. We're still dealing with ramifications from the communist system, but maybe we don't have that anymore. And I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know, are they fully, you know, democratic? Is it free market, or is it still an oligarch? But I imagine there's some good things happening there. But it was apparently not in vogue to show those things. We still needed to think of them as a war-torn, dictator-led oligopoly, right? Which... would you guys go to Russia? If I said, let's go to Russia, would you go?
That's a lot of time zones away. I would
if you had a week.
What's that?
I'd be interested. I'd be interested if you.
I've been to Cuba with both of you gentlemen last year.
I'd totally go back to Cuba. I mean, these are very different places, but I would totally go back to Cuba.
Cuba does have a little bit better weather.
If you're talking about like, of the trips that I'm willing to cross more than 2 time zones and spend a lot of time traveling to go do, that's pretty low on my list of priorities. But just like the intellectual question, like, would I want to explore, understand what's going on there? Totally. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Well, maybe a last question, because I've got to go soon. But my last question, you guys, is on the similar vein. Would you go to Ukraine? And who should go to Ukraine? Like, or should we? I know that the U.S. has been defending Ukraine, and you know it was popular for a while to have to and maybe still is among some. Some still think we should be defending them. Put the Ukraine flag in your X profile or Instagram, or fly the flag. Like, would you guys go to Ukraine, and why should we? Should we keep going on Ukraine? Take
when
a
you
side.
say should I go, do you mean should our country be spending money there, or do I want to vacation there? I'd rather not vacation in a country where there's a current war going on.
Well, yeah, that's fair.
My take on it is, let's see, I'll try to steel man that the United States of America, our government, should heavily invest in supporting Ukraine's fight against the Russian invasion.
I want to take that too. I have a thought.
I'll try to do that.
Ahead,
like to support that, I feel like you must believe that Russia, particularly Russia led by Putin, is an existential threat, or a very, very serious threat to the West, and particularly the United States. So if you do believe that, I think that I can understand that argument. I personally do not believe that. And to the question of like who should go, I'm kind of like, I don't think the United States should be investing in wars anywhere. I really don't. Like, that's my view. I think that's a bad thing for us to do. And if you believe in that cause, I think you should send your money, write a check, go send your children or encourage them to go or go yourself. And plenty of people have. Like Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s son went and volunteered with the Ukrainian army. Like, there's a bunch of people who've gone over and done that, and you can totally
famous authors went and fought in the Spanish War.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, like Hemingway. Didn't he? Or no, he was a journalist there. He was there covering it. Yeah. But and that was a common thing before the United States entered the Second World War. Tons of Americans went over and volunteered to fight. So why not just go do that? But I don't think our federal government needs to be doing that.
Yeah. So the other side I've heard that if I wanted to steel man why we should do it too is a bit of it is economics and probably not the way you think. A lot of us look at these numbers and we say, why are we spending $300 billion on Ukraine? And I'm just naming that number. I don't have nothing to back that up.
I think that's like a number of like all countries combined, or it's something approaching that.
Yeah. And so, one could say that, in the U.S., we do have a large budget for defense. It is a big portion of what we do to defend the ideals of the United States. And so we take great pride in defending the way of our life, right? And I think we all agree that should never go to zero, because the moment we stop defending our way of life, it's going to get taken away from us. Same way if we didn't have guns, things will get taken away from us. So I think we should have. And so what I think people say is they say, look, when we go out and to defend other countries who are democratic, that could be up for debate, but who have democratic ideals, we should do it and we should spend our money. And when we spend our money, if we say we're going to supply arms to Ukraine, that creates a ton of jobs for companies over here that do munitions and build things and factories. And then maybe I've heard that too, that when we do these budgets, they're just numbers, and that we're actually giving them old munitions and old weapons that we are going to basically dispose of. And then we're creating new ones for ourselves. So by doing that and giving those, because a bomb is worthless if it doesn't explode. So it has to go, right? Like the old shirt that, the guy from The Simpsons used to wear. It says, nuke the whales. And Lisa's like, why you say that? He's like, gotta nuke something, right? We gotta use them, right? So these munitions just don't want to sit. And so they're just going to get wasted. So we give them to those who have done it, and then we create new ones. And so it really isn't the economic incentive for us to do it is very high. It both increases the American ideals and propagates, what we think of as America, and it creates more jobs. Now, again, that's the steelman side. Whether or not you believe that, again, Geoff, you might say
the very best steelman we can do is it creates jobs for weapons manufacturers, which may be the best steelman. That may be the very best possible argument for why we should be involved. I don't think that's a great argument.
It's fair. It's fair.
But, the economic argument for war and intervention, I guess everything is economics at some point, but I don't know. I go back to Ron Paul's blowback speech. I'm not, a lot of people invoke that, not speech, but when asked about why we should, do y'all know that? When this was during the Republican nomination debate, not long after 9/11, when he was on stage with all the other Republican nominees for president. Ron Paul, he's a libertarian, but he was running pursuing the Republican presidential nomination. And the moderator asked him, hey, you've kind of ruffled some feathers by saying the United States should not be, should not be over there invading these countries or, occupying these countries. Can you explain that? And he was like, yeah, we shouldn't do that. That's bad. Our presence there is actually causing us to become a total. That's right. Why they attacked us in 9/11 was because we're occupying their territory. That's called blowback. And at the time, the zeitgeist was totally different than it was now. People were like, that's terrible. He's a traitor for saying that. And
Sure.
Rudy Giuliani like totally dressed him down, and the whole audience like applauded. And then you look back and you look at that thing now, and you're like, whoa, Ron Paul was totally right. So I'm not a fan of we need to be intervening so that we can create jobs for our.
Oh, there's a little bit of the world police, like if and that's the extreme side of it is like, do we need to be the world police or do we need to defend our ideals? Because
something I love seeing. Let me get this point in, but when last week or whatever time there was some question, like the president was signaling to Zelensky that Ukraine was not going to have the support of the United States anymore. They were having a disagreement about this, and I think that's still in flux right now. But what immediately happened after that is all of Europe was like, oh, okay, we'll start helping. We'll start paying. And I'm like, okay, that's a good thing for us. Like maybe we should not be the world police, and maybe other people will start taking their obligations to defend themselves more seriously if we're not. And this buying influence by providing the police force thing is not a good trade.
Somebody told me the numbers. They're like, there's 500 million Europeans asking the 300 million Americans to defend them against the 100 million Russians. And they're like, the math doesn't work out. Like, why are we asking for all of our help to do it? Anyway, Craig, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I interrupted you, Craig.
Oh, no. Well, it was maybe circling back to just like, one of my big questions is like, is it our government's responsibility to employ Americans, and what do they say? Is it roughly what percent of our GDP is government spending?
Yeah, there's a debate.
So, and if this current administration is clearly trying to reduce that,
sure.
If let's just say they cut it in half, how long, my question is, that's going to create a lot of chaos in our economy in the near term. And how long does that take for it to work itself back out to where, we're thriving? And I love the idea of saying, let's not continually operate in a deficit, but I don't love the idea of, for my business and my family and my employees, there being, a lot of economic instability. And so, and that's where I dance around and get in trouble. And that's why I think forever everybody's just kicked the can down the road.
There was a time during the Great Recession in my industry, construction at the time, had a software business that served the construction industry. And there were a lot of contracts. This wasn't their first recession, but it was clearly the worst. But the folks who I think persevered through that the best, they kind of had this mantra of you make your own economy. Go out and make your own economy. And like you try to figure out how. And, that could mean a lot of things. And it was a bit of a jingo, right, just like a positive self-talk. But it's within your power to insulate yourself against these recessionary forces, these economic downturn forces. And it's incumbent upon us to think about that. Not everybody can, obviously people are different places in their lives. But I think, if you have the means to do it, you can look far enough ahead. You can, the money might go away, but you can still have a great, prosperous, wonderful, enriching life. I'm fine.
Well, it's like the 22-year-old venture capitalist I just spoke to who said the best companies are built in recessions. I mean, the guy's been in the industry for about a year now, so he's right.
He must have read some case studies.
Well, gentlemen, I've got to go earn some money for my venture capital and investors. I've got to go mow some lawns. But this was fun,
you guys. Yeah, thanks for getting together.
Thanks, Geoff.
Let's do it again soon.
All righty. So long.